Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our town hall meeting to discuss community policing relations with the city of Indianapolis and various members of our law enforcement community, and equally as important, members of our community who are clergy and faith-based leaders, also young people who are engaged and involved, and really taking a proactive step in making sure that Indianapolis is a national model for community policing relations. My name is Aaron Williams. I have the privilege of being your moderator for this evening, and also on behalf of Peace in the Streets as the executive director and co-founder, we say thank you so much for tuning in and joining us, and welcome. First and foremost, I'd like to give honor to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for just allowing me to be here today, and just to be able to take the things that I've learned over the last several years and talk about it and discuss it in a format that allows, once again, our city to be a more productive and safer city for all. Today's event is being broadcast live on several social media pages, including Facebook, from our partners at Fox 59 News, CBS Channel 4, WRTV 6 Channel 6 News, and also the stations of Radio 1, 106.7 FM, 96.3 WHHH, and AM 1310 The Light. In addition, we will be able to take your questions on WTHR.com and their social media pages. Please, we ask that you engage with our panel that is here this evening, and we ask that you not only provide questions to our panel on how we can make Indianapolis a better place, but we would love to hear from you on solutions. What can we do as a community to make Indianapolis safer, and also to have a more collaborative partnership with our law enforcement community? Right now, we are going to move over to our esteemed panelists, and we're going to start with Pastor Ellis from the 10-Point Coalition. Each member of our panelists will introduce themselves, the agency or area of responsibility that they are over, and also what they hope to accomplish for tonight. We will move from Pastor Ellis down to Pastor Jackson, and then we will start at the back with U.S. Attorney Minkler and move over to Major Roney from the Marion County Sheriff's Department. Pastor Ellis?
Thank you, Aaron. Yes, I'm Pastor Charles Ellis, pastor of 25th Street Baptist Church, and I currently serve as the executive director of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. And we want to talk more about relations between the police and the community at large, and the role that community policing plays in that.
Thank you.
I'm Terry Curry, Marion County prosecutor. In our office, we have almost 400 women and men. Our primary responsibility is to prosecute any crime that touches upon Marion County. And I think as part of our message tonight, we are out in the community every single day through our Community Prosecution Division, and we are looking forward to the day when IMPD is at adequate staffing where that they can implement a true community policing model.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Slash. I'm here as a community resource and advocate. Highly involved in all of central Indiana, but mainly in Indianapolis, and very excited to be here as we come up with some solutions and we have great dialogue. Thank you.
My name is Chris Reeder, and I'm Chief of Staff for Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. I believe one of the things that we'd like to accomplish tonight is to make sure that we not only enforce law, but that we also engage and enhance the opportunities for people to get involved. We want the power to direct our police force to lie with the community so that the community feels safe, and so they're able to count on us when they're in need. So that's one of the things that we'd like to accomplish.
Good evening. I'm James Jackson, lead pastor, Fervent Prayer Church, also president of the Far East Side Action Coalition. Hope to bring attention to and inspire others to use collective impact models to solve our problems more quickly and sufficiently.
Good evening. I'm Josh Minkler. I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana. We cover all federal prosecutable crimes occurring in 60 counties, going from roughly Kokomo, Indiana, down to the Ohio River. So federal violations of criminal law occurring in Marion County would follow and fall under our jurisdiction. One of the challenges for prosecutors where we need the community's help is in cooperation from victims and witnesses to crimes. One of the recent developments that I've seen and I've been doing this for a while, is that the so-called no snitch culture has spread from just other co-defendants and other individuals in gangs now to victims of crimes and witnesses to crimes, where they feel they shouldn't cooperate with police and prosecutors. I'm interested in the community's feedback as to why that is. Is it out of fear? Is it out of lack of trust? And I'd be interested in hearing from the community on that. Thank you.
My name is Nigel Long. I'm just a youth that lives here in Indianapolis, born and raised here in Indianapolis. Very passionate about social justice and advancing the advancement of black people as a whole. Tonight I want to bring 4 reform ideas to the table for policing, or 4 suggestions that came from the community, and those are we want to look at the way they train, look at the transparency of departments, the accountability of departments, as well as the engagement that they have with the community. And I think that with those 4 focuses, I think we can get some pretty good solutions out of tonight and moving forward.
My name is Doug Carter. I'm the superintendent of the Indiana State Police. I have very diverse law enforcement responsibilities around the state of Indiana. Most specifically, though, I live right here in the Indianapolis metropolitan area, and I'm very, very proud of this community. I'm very, very proud of this city. I believe that the only thing that lasts forever in our lifetime is dying, and there's way, way, way too much of that now. I believe that we can come a long way in regards to understanding different cultures, and that doesn't have to be a negative thing. That can be a very positive thing. The law enforcement piece of this is very, very important, and it's time that we take that rearview mirror off of our life, off of our windshield, stop looking back and look forward and engage in this really true dialogue. People like Nigel can make the big difference, and I'm looking forward to partnering with him and everything that he represents.
My name's Jay Abbott. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI's Indianapolis division. I have about 140 special agents spread throughout the state of Indiana, with about another 140 professional staff who support their investigative efforts. And I think one of the things I'd like to see come out of this discussion tonight is, the national trend, of course, is this loss of trust between law enforcement and the African American and other minority groups that law enforcement serves. And how is it that we best serve you in a collaborative way to achieve rebuilding, and in our case, I hope, strengthening that trust that we have as a partnership in community policing?
I am B. Swift from Hot 96.3. I'm the night jock and music director. I'm here because I'm here for the youth, and I want to make sure the youth voice is heard. Not only is it heard, that actions that's said in this meeting are taken and actually put into place, so the youth understands that everyone up here does care about them, and we're just not saying things and then sweeping it under the rug. So I want to make sure that things actually come out of this meeting and being put into place.
I am Major Reggie Roney of the Marion County Sheriff's Office, lifelong resident of Indianapolis and a 46-year police officer. I'd like to make sure that when we leave here, that we leave here as one community, all working together to solve a common problem that I'm sure we can all defeat.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Once again, if you are following the conversation, we hope that you would ask your question to whatever feed that you are watching, and we will coordinate with our local media partners and ask them of the viewers that they have what questions they'd like to have answered. And also be sure to follow on the social media pages with the hashtag Peace in the Streets. Once again, the hashtag for this event is Peace in the Streets. So our first question that we have that we are going to pass over to Chief Brian Reeder from IMPD, and then we're going to have that followed up with an answer by Reverend Charles Ellis, is how do we learn more about current police trainings on race relations?
We are currently looking at our training curriculum and building in sequence of information regarding implicit bias. One of the things that I think needs to happen is that we have a real conversation about race in this country, and the biases that exist on both sides of the fence when it comes to police as well as civilians. We are looking at changing that curriculum. We have some diversity training currently that recruits go through, but we're really wanting to start to dig deeper in terms of getting an understanding as to why individuals do some of the things that they do, and not even realizing that that bias exists. I think that's one of the biggest things that when we start talking about policing and community policing that we have to address. Once we do that, then we're able to slow down the thinking process and get people to understand if we don't identify the problem, then we can't address it. So we need to identify the fact, realize that we have that implicit bias, and then start dealing with it. Bias does not mean racist. Bias does not mean that you are a bad person. And I think sometimes we fail to define the terms that we use, and so consequently we get a misunderstanding about what it is we're talking about. We understand in terms of the police department, we have over 1,600 individuals who are police officers, and we understand that we have the vast majority of the police officers that serve us are very, very good people. We do have some people that have problems, but I don't think you can look at any profession and not find someone who has some issues. The thing is, do you recognize when you have a problem? If you recognize that there's an issue, you can start to address it. The problem is, for such a long time, we haven't addressed the issue because we haven't really looked at the real problem.
Thank you, Chief. Pastor Ellis?
Yeah, I would just say, well, I am heartened that IMPD is thinking about the implicit bias training, because it's something that is sorely needed, and I think even to be looking at that as curriculum puts us light years ahead of some other places to even be having that conversation. The other thing I would say, along with that, you got to understand that trust, and it's the effect of a lot of things, and even historically, the trust is weak. And so when the trust is weak, you have to go the extra mile to try to restore and rebuild that. And one of the things that, as we try to build that trust, one of the things that we must do is when wrongdoing is found, we have to really go after those people that are doing wrong and really, make them pay the price. Because, what you hear from the community is, well, they're not going to do anything anyway, So we have to really, in an effort to build that trust, we have to go the extra mile to make sure that everything that we're working for the same goal. And as you said, there are people, there are bad folks in any profession. And just as long as when those things come up, that we address them, and we address them openly, honestly, and with transparency.
Thank you. A follow-up question to that from Charles is going to be directed toward Prosecutor Curry. It seems that individuals are arrested for multiple crimes and also charged for those crimes, but the prosecution seems as though they get a slap on the wrist or released for committing the same crime over and over. What procedures or policies are in place to reform that so that these same individuals are not released so early?
Well, first of all, if an individual is arrested, there is a bail matrix that determines what that individual is entitled to in terms of a bond. That matrix is set with input from public defenders, our office, courts, and obviously to the extent that an individual has a criminal history, that will impact the bond in terms of a higher amount. But ultimately, any individual who's accused of a crime other than murder is entitled to a bond. And to the extent, and it is often as frustrating to us as is the community that someone has committed a crime is back on the street 2 days later. But that is a function of obviously their constitutional rights and the due process that's built into the criminal justice system. And ultimately then, it falls to us to prosecute an individual for a crime. I take exception, I guess, to the idea that, there's a slap on the wrist. We prosecute the crime according to the crime committed, and then it's the legislature that determines, what's the level of the penalty for that to be imposed by the court. Otherwise, I think the legislature was well intended when they revised the code here 2 years ago. The criminal code was revised in a comprehensive manner for the first time since 1988. And in our mind, and I think in a lot of the minds of a lot of individuals, to the extent that their intent was to reduce the population of the Department of Corrections, they went the wrong way on some serious crimes in terms of the penalty imposed. But those are the rules we operate under, and otherwise, I guess I can assure you that we prosecute every crime based upon the circumstances as they exist in that matter.
Thank you. A question that we have from Denise, it's directed towards Superintendent Carter. It says, citizens need to know what officers are expected to do when they suspect illegal activity and the do's and don'ts if citizens are pulled over. How are the state police trained, and similar to any other law enforcement agency on the panel? But we're going to have Superintendent Carter answer that.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I appreciate it very, very much. There's tremendous, tremendous work that goes into training law enforcement officers today. Is very different than when I started many, many years ago, particularly from the cultural diversity side. We've built in a very, 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 very deep bench in regards to the cultural diversity training that we've established within the ISP, up to and including taking a trip to Washington, D.C. and spending some time with Representative Lewis, who is one of the longest serving members of Congress. I would encourage you to research what that training might look like. In regards to the training of the individual officers, discretion is a big thing. Discretionary authority is really, really a big deal, particularly in the training curriculum. There's a lot the policemen can do, but there's very little that they should do. And it's important that they stay within that lane of what they should be doing rather than what they can. As the Chief of Staff indicated earlier, there are going to be people in this profession that make wrong choices. It's the challenges for me, and you should hold me accountable to make sure that I hold them accountable when those things occur. Sometimes it takes longer than what we would prefer to find out what were the facts of that particular situation. But in regards to the management of troopers in the field all over Indiana, from South Bend to Evansville and Richmond to Terre Haute, those first line supervisors are very, very, very important so that they manage what happens during the course of any day with those frontline troopers at the local districts. I would encourage you to please, if you feel like you need to talk to one of us, that you do. I think we've done our community a huge disservice over time. I'm talking about over decades. When we talk about community policing today in 2016, we talk about it as a brand new concept. It's not. Community policing is decades old. It's what we've done since the very inception of policing in the early 1800s in this country. So that notion is not new, but we are not without sin. I heard Chief Flynn from Milwaukee, Wisconsin talk about that many, many months ago, and he is exactly right. We can take that back decades and try and understand why our communities don't trust us like they used to. But I believe that eventually we can re-earn that trust, that we can find some solidarity and standing with our local communities, whether it's a big city like the city of Indianapolis or rural communities all over Indiana. And just maybe you'll trust us, and if you trust us, you'll talk to us. If you'll talk to us, imagine what we might be able to prevent. So I appreciate the question. It's a very difficult one to answer, and I have a lot more in my mind, but I'll defer my time to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Superintendent. Once again, if you are following us live on any of the social media streams, the hashtag for the event is Peace in the Streets. We're going to pose one other question to the panelists, those who are viewing from the comforts of their home or wherever else. We are going to move after this next question to our members of the media. We're going to start with Radio 1 and move down. But we do have a question for Adrian Slash and also Nigel Long that both of you can answer. Adrian, the question for you is, what current programs or groups are currently involved in Indianapolis now that other young people or parents can get engaged in that talks about how to improve community relations? And the same goes for you, Nigel.
It's kind of a loaded question. So let's see here. The majority of youth serving agencies in Indianapolis in some way, shape, form, or fashion have opened the door. They're opening their doors and telling people, if you want to talk about it, we want to talk about it. I'm a member of the Exchange at the Indianapolis Urban League, and we're working really hard to make sure that if someone has a question, they have a concern, that we can at least hear it and point them in the right direction. And I think that's the best answer that I can give you, is that you've got your concerned community groups, and they're ready. The NAACP even has a handout the 411 on the 911 that you can look at. You can go through it and say, this is what I should do when I'm interacting with an officer. And I think that that's a really important thing that we are looking at it from that perspective, what you should do, and making sure that people are understanding that if we're all educating outward that we should be being respectful, we should be making sure that everyone gets to go home safely, and we should treat everyone with the same respect that we're treating our family or our friends with. We should, right? The word is should. And as long as we're pushing should, and every organization is pushing should, well, you should actually be able to see some sort of change.
Thank you. Nigel.
The groups that come to mind first when it comes to, community relations is something that that's very important. But I feel like a lot of the things we have to take out to our communities, and we have to put our badges down. We have to put our guns down. On the side of black people, we have to put our aggression down. And sometimes we have to create a place to where we can all sit down and talk, just like this kind of. But one of the things that I'm involved in is an organization called Don't Sleep. And some of the things we do is basically just tearing down some of the barriers and civil disobedience, and making sure that we're making our voices heard so that legislation and movement can happen, so that we can benefit both groups and both sides. Some of the other things that we have that are people can get involved in. We're doing boycotts. We're boycotting different businesses and different corporations that start or that are in bed with ALEC and that are in bed with the mass incarceration. And what we want to do is we definitely want to start to support those things so that as a community, as a black community especially, we can start to move forward and get some change, because we can't leave it up to the police officers to change police brutality. We have to show that we are tired of it, and we can't just continue to sit back, and the groups that are doing things, we can't just continue to let people come to us. Sometimes we have to take it to the streets, and we have to go out and get those people and say, hey, this is what's going on, whether you understand it fully or not, we have to do something about it. And so.
Thank you, Nigel and Adrian, for that feedback. We're going to move it over to Max Williams with the stations of Radio 1. And Max, what question do you have for the panel from your viewers?
This question is not directed to anyone specifically.
Okay.
First question is, will there be better assessment of mentality of officers or better training to de-escalate situations and deeper background checks for these officers as well?
I'm going to have Chief Reeder answer that, and then followed by Major Roney.
Well, right now, background checks are very extensive. It is a difficult situation to try and determine the psychological aspect of a person that is applying for the police department. Hopefully through the training, hopefully by interaction with those supervisors during that training period, as well as the FTO program, the field training officer program that follows the actual recruit training. If there are deficiencies, they will be determined. Part of, again, the solution to this is that when you see an officer or if you are encountered by an officer and you feel that you have not received the kind of service that you would like to receive, the best thing to do is to contact the Citizens Police Complaint Board. When you do that, then you give us an opportunity, number one, to address the activity or the action that took place in the field, but two, to start to look at where there may be some training deficiencies, where there may be some additional testing that needs to be done prior to a person actually becoming a police officer. This is vital information if we're going to start to change the actions of and the behaviors of individuals who are out in the field. We are attempting to do a lot of things. We've only been at this point, the new administration with Chief Riggs. We've only been doing this for 7 months. Yet, over that 7-month period, we have had 11 police officers that have been discharged for misbehavior or for violating rules and regulations of the department. I've been involved with the police department for over 24 years. This will be my 26th year. And over that period of time, I cannot tell you that I have ever seen this number of police officers dismissed in this shorter period of time. So I think we have a chief now who is very sensitive to the service and the activity and the behavior of his officers in the street. I think along with that, when you start to deal with the Federal Bureau, with the Justice Department and consent decrees that are coming down all over the country against organizations and law enforcement agencies that are violating rules, regulations, and they have been able to establish patterns and practices within those departments that are weak. Us not wanting to be a part of those individuals who receive those consent decrees have given us also the opportunity to move forward the 21st century police model. All of these things are coming about because we have a progressive administration with Mayor Hogsett. We've been given a mandate by Mayor Hogsett to make sure that we have the best police department in the United States. We have a chief who is now wanting to make sure that that happens. We're putting people in positions that are qualified and looking at every aspect of how we can become better. I think I heard someone say we have to do better. And if you've been around Chief Riggs any period of time, you hear that over and over, that we have to be better. We have to stop doing business the way we have been doing it, and he's made that perfectly clear, along with developing relationships with the Fraternal Order of Police. I don't know how many of those individuals who were released were backed by the FOP, but I know that there were several who weren't. So we have a Fraternal Order of Police that is now buying into that. We have, excuse me, the administration as well as the city administration that are giving those mandates. So I think we're on a road that within the next couple of years, we can see some really advances when it comes to community police relationships. Pastor Jackson has been a part of some of the reforms that have occurred over the last 3 years, and I'm sure he'll speak to that. But we want to engage the community. Part of that, and I'm not sure who said it, but in 1800s, the statement was the police are the community and the community are the police. We are part of the same issues. We all want to live safely. We all want to be able to go out at night and deal with, just go around our business without being unsafe. So these are all the things that we're trying to do. And again, give us some time. We've only been doing this, like I said, for 7 months. So we're doing some really great things, and I'm sure they'll talk to it again. But I don't want to take up all the time because I could. But I hope that I'm answering the questions, and I want to make sure that the community becomes engaged. That's one of the things that we have not seen. We hear about the perceptions of the community. We hear people telling stories about what's going on, but you have to be engaged. You have to go take the time out to fill out those complaint forms. You have to talk to your commanders in the districts where you're located. You have to be a part of the solution and not just relegate yourself to complaining about what's going on or what you perceive to be going on.
Thank you, Chief Reader. We have over 280 questions pending in our queue. Thank you for that answer. We appreciate it. We're going to go to Major Roney, and then we're going to kick it over to Superintendent Carter. Thank you once again for that. If we could keep our answers just a little bit shorter, that would help us preserve time.
To add on to what Chief Reader and Superintendent Carter said previously, we start training and start weeding people when they apply for a position with our department. And we continue to try to improve our weeding process so we can put the very best officers on the street. We give them psychological exams. We're always looking to improve our psychological exams to weed out before they get to the street. But just in case they do get to the street, we need your help to help us weed them out any further. The Sheriff, John Layton, alongside of the IMPD and the state police, we do not want bad apples on our department, and we will do whatever we can to make sure they're not here once they're proven to be bad. But we do have 100%, 99% are very good officers.
Thank you. Superintendent Carter?
Just very quickly, I'd like to add, there are 35,000 custodial arrests made in America on any given day. And you can probably add a zero, maybe 2 zeros to that number over the course of a given day in regards to police interactions around our nation. And there's not a policeman out there that's got any time on the other side of this badge that's not damaged. You see, death, dying, destruction, hurt, pain, and sorrow are not normal. And there was a point in time in the early 80s when I began, and in the early 60s when my father began, where it was almost expected behavior, the way in which you responded to that. But I believe if the heart, mind, and soul are healthy, that the individual is going to be healthy and they're going to be able to go out into a community and very unselfishly serve over time. We've got to be very, very careful because those things that I described are not normal. And they can have a very detrimental and very negative effect on the reality of that individual officer. So let's not forget that there are hundreds of thousands of interactions around this nation routinely that go unreported.
Really quick, Pastor Jackson, and then we're going to have Special Agent from the FBI comment. Pastor Jackson?
And with regard to the question that was asked, when I served on the Merit Board, which is the governing board for the police department here in Indianapolis, the background checks were extremely extensive. There were a lot of people who applied of every ethnicity that didn't make it because they just couldn't make the grade. As far as training is concerned, the first year on the Merit Board, they sent me to Canada to observe the training methods of the Royal Mounted Police, the Canadian Police. And I observed their training, and what they do is what's called scenario-based training. We were supposed to bring that back to see how we could do it in Indianapolis. During one of the breaks, and I think this is something that we have to change, at least in Canada, the mindset. One of the new cadets said, "I like the way you guys kick posterior." Of course, he used an expletive. He said, "I like the way your cops kick posterior in the United States." And I never forgot that because that was their perception of our policing. Scenario-based training is not more training or more thorough training. It's what kind of training we need to do. Scenario-based training puts a man or a woman who wants to be an officer or who has become an officer in that situation. If a pilot, you want to train them on how to behave or to respond in a crash, you put them in that situation. So I think we need to create scenarios on the street during our training. I think we do have some, but we need to go a little further and create some of those race-related scenarios with black youth and the things that we hear about around the country and make that part of the training. And then officers you can kind of see how they respond. You can train them a little bit better how to respond in those situations.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the next question. We have Jill Glavin from Fox 59 and CBS 4 with a question.
Yes. I have a question through Facebook from Irene, who asked, what are we going to do about the drug problem we have in Indianapolis? Drug use is increasing in my neighborhood.
So I'm going to direct that to Prosecutor Curry to answer as a follow-up, knowing that his office deals with that specifically and the crimes that are presented to his office for conviction.
And I think part of the answer to that goes back to, not surprisingly, staffing with the police department, because over the years there has been an emphasis on the district level. IMPD's divided into various districts within the county, and the individual districts had narcotics officers who were basically focused on the dealer on the corner, the one that's impacting quality of life in any given neighborhood, with some urging from our office, IMPD, and in conjunction with Josh's office and the federal authorities. We started looking at more long-term investigations to try and break the larger drug dealing operations, and as a consequence, I think IMPD, to a certain extent, and again it's because of staffing, got away from the local corner level dealers, and so now, based upon Chief Riggs entering office and with input from our office, I think all of us are trying to strike a balance to not only continue to focus upon those sophisticated criminal organizations, but also knowing that small-time dealer on the corner is impacting quality of life in any given neighborhood, and that focusing on those again at the district level. So we're trying to do both, because in order to address the drug dealing in the county effectively, well, that's the way we need to approach it.
As a follow-up question to that is, Attorney Minkler, what can the federal level, what can be done at a federal level for those who are repeat offenders to ensure that they are incarcerated for a longer period of time for dealing narcotics or any substance that is considered to be abusive?
Sure, and I'll answer that question directly. So the federal level and the Congress has given federal prosecutors mandatory minimum sentencing. And so essentially for every drug conviction, your sentence doubles. Now there's no denying that that has also had a disparate impact on some neighborhoods and where individuals think it's unfair that they've been exposed to those longer sentences. What I think we need to focus on, at least from a federal level, particularly in Indianapolis and a lot of places in Indiana, is that when I started 22 years ago, the source cities for narcotics coming into Indianapolis were Chicago or New York or Los Angeles or Miami, local places. Now, for Indianapolis, it comes directly from the southwestern border. So they're bigger drug organizations that are shipping massive quantities of drugs into Indianapolis. So I agree with Prosecutor Curry. The street-level narcotics is a challenge, but from the federal level, we have to go over the bigger drug organizations, taking those cases back many times to the border. And so when I use a strong mandatory minimum sentence, what I like to use it on is the larger drug dealers, the drug kingpins that are responsible for bringing pounds and pounds of methamphetamine or kilos and kilos of heroin. And then for the violent street corner dealer, the guy with the gun, the guy that uses violence when dealing the pills, that's where I would prefer to use mandatory minimum sentencing instead of just a first-time drug offender that happens to be selling, a $20 bag of cocaine.
Perfect. We are going to move over to Pastor Gurton, who is monitoring our social media on Twitter. Once again, the hashtag is Peace in the Streets. And if you have questions that you'd like to ask our panel, please use Twitter with the hashtag Peace in the Streets, or feel free to ask them with one of our various media partners that are streaming live. Pastor Gurton.
Well, thank you. There's several questions that have come through. I think one of the questions, I think what she's really getting at is she's asking about strengthening laws for owning guns and weapons. She suggests the police should only own guns and law enforcement. I think we understand what she's getting at there.
So would love to hear the feedback from Pastor Jackson, knowing that you've been involved with that. And earlier today on AM 1310, you mentioned some of the different things that the legislator could do, and also would like to hear feedback as well as from Adrian Slash on things that have come up in your dealings with the Urban League Exchange and the dialogue that they're having. Pastor Jackson?
As far as strengthening laws for people who own guns, I think that was the question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? At a legislative level, I don't think we, as a community, spend enough time talking about that issue. People don't own guns. There's over, as I understand it, 300 million guns on the streets in the United States of America. So you're not going to recollect over 300 million guns, and those guns are in the hands of police officers as well as criminals. From a biblical perspective, the Bible says a wise king stamps out crime by severe punishment. And we hate to talk about that, but if a person chooses a life of crime, then you have to deal with that. As far as trying to strengthen the gun laws, I think that a group like this, sitting down with legislators and talking about it until we follow through. There's two words or two terms that I think are very important. There's follow-up and there's follow-through, and most people have trouble with both. You follow up and by responding to emails, texts, and letters, but then you follow through by making sure you go all the way to the end of the thing to get to the solution. Mm-hmm. We have black legislators. We have more black legislators at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level than we've ever had in the history of black people in this nation. But we don't spend enough time as black folks, and we don't spend enough time as a community talking about these issues together. It's going to require that. No matter what side of the table you're on, we got to get that issue, talk about it, and there's a solution to it.
Thank you. Adrian?
Let's see here. From my perspective, I think that there's a couple of different words that can actually be short so we can get through these questions. Common sense gun legislation. Just common sense. The first thing that we hear every time that there is any sort of a shooting is, well, how and why did he have a gun? And I think that we owe it to our youth to be able to actually answer that question. How and why did that person get a gun? And how and why are those sorts of people still going to continue to get them? And what are we going to do about it? And at the Urban League, we have, as a part of the exchange, we have a legislative policy team that does talk to our legislators and invites people to learn how to track bills and invites people to learn who they need to be talking to, when they need to be talking to them, and not just while the legislators in session, but at all times. We even traveled to D.C. and talked to folks there on the Hill. You have to keep doing that, but the biggest thing is it's a whole community that needs to be vigilant. It's not just the people who are wearing suits who are going to talk to the legislators. It's everyone. Community vigilance is probably the most necessary thing to answer the last two questions that we had.
Great feedback. As a follow-up question to that, Special Agent Abbott, what specifically is your agency, the FBI, doing to curb the number of illegal guns that we're seeing on our streets as far as getting them off the streets?
Yeah, that's a function that ATF is very directed at, because they every time a weapon is used in a crime, they will try to take information from those ballistics or from the weapon in order to pursue justice in that regard. But another thing that I think that is good for the listeners to be aware of is the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, which exists at our Criminal Justice Information Services Division in West Virginia. And each state applies the Second Amendment to the Constitution to bear arms in different ways. And the FBI, through the NICS section back in West Virginia, applies what each state wants to do. And I think the comments that were made about how this is truly a societal and thus a legislative issue that has to be addressed, those things that the FBI enforces through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System can be increased or made more stringent through legislation. But that has to be done at the federal and state level in order to accomplish that.
Thank you. We are going to continue with our questions. We're going to go to Liz from WRTV6 News.
This question is from Denise Thompson off of Facebook. She wants to know, is it true that a number of releases will be occurring in the near future because of overcrowding? And if so, what are some of the other alternatives?
Major Roney from the Sheriff's Department. I like how Prosecutor Curry said, hey, we'll piggyback. Okay, Major Roney, then Prosecutor Curry.
Okay. We do the releases when we are ordered by the court to do releases. We do not release people from the Marion County Sheriff's Department jail without authorization from the courts, from the court system. So we don't know about that.
Yeah, I think what she was referring to is there has been some discussion because the population of the Marion County Jail, the combination Marion County Jail and the community corrections component of that, have reached the levels that potentially exceed the constitutional mandate as to what's cruel and unusual punishment by having individuals. These are individuals who are virtually all of them, 95 to 99%, are individuals who are being held pre-trial pending their resolution of their case. But the level of the population of those jails is reaching the point where there has been discussions whether there should be emergency release of individuals just so that we're not in violation of the U.S. Constitution. However, all of the partners in the criminal justice system continue to have input and work on making sure that that doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened to date, and hopefully as we continue to work on it, address it, that will not happen.
We're going to kick it over to B. Swift from WHHH with a question that he has.
I have a question, and it's happened to me personally, probably by every branch sitting up here other than the federal branches. But how do we get rid of the profiling that happens? I'm a young man who has a 1985 Monte Carlo with big rims and flashy paint. You know, and I've been pulled over. I know we talked about this earlier with Mr. Reader, but I've been pulled over. I've seen numerous friends pulled over, and I'm profiled as being a drug dealer because of the car I drive and the way I carry myself, the way I dress. How do we get rid of this, or how do we make our voices heard? You know, when we file those complaints, will they be taken serious, or will it be swept under the rug? Because these are things that we go throughout our community. Like I say, it's happened to me personally. It's happened to friends. I've seen it happen to other people. So, and it's been sheriffs, it's been IMPD, it's been on the highway with the state troopers, every branch. So how do we fix that problem and tone that down? Because every kid with a old school on big rims isn't a drug dealer, he goes to work. Or, you know what I'm saying? Or every kid in the S550 isn't a drug dealer, he goes to work and might just make that amount of money to be able to afford those vehicles.
That's a good question. I'm going to have, I know Superintendent Carter wants to answer that. I am going to have Chief Reader start off, but I want to dig a little deeper, Superintendent Carter, when you answer that question. One thing in particular that came up earlier today is what happens when that happens with a state trooper who may be traditionally stationed in a more rural area, and then they're on a special assignment in an area that's more urban with a more diverse population? What happens there? And then the final comment we'll get is from Pastor Ellis on what the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition is doing to combat this as well. Chief Reader.
Well, racial profiling is a violation of our rules and regulations, period. So if that happens, you need to, number one, file a complaint. The complaint process is not as laborious as some people might think. It used to take a lot longer, but since we've made those reforms, and Pastor Jackson was a part of that reform strategy that we came up with, there's a methodology now. It should take 4 to 6 weeks to go through the process of actually having the complaint actually investigated and a disposition placed on that. It'll go before, in many instances, this kind of complaint probably would go before the Citizens Police Complaint Board. It'll be reviewed. The disposition will be looked at. If this particular police officer continues to have these kinds of complaints, because of the new disciplinary system that has been engaged, actions will be taken in terms of disciplinary action against that officer for violating this particular rule. The issue is this. In many instances, if there is racial profiling, if there is another violation, a traffic violation, crossing the yellow line, speeding, doing something of that nature, that's what they will stop you for. So if you take your time to make sure that you're not violating anything and they just stop you for no apparent reason, that then will engage that whole piece in terms of racial profiling. But if there's any other violation, traffic violation or anything, lights out, plates not up to date, anything like that, then we have other issues. So I hate to say make sure that you're valid so that if they stop you, they have no reason to stop you.
Good point. Very good point. Superintendent Carter.
We talked earlier about culture, and it's so very important. We've not done a good job. We've not done a good job understanding each other's culture and what caused us to think the way that we do. And that's one of the things that I've learned through the cultural diversity training that we have within the ISP. It's so very important, and frankly, it caused me to look at life very differently after sitting through that and understanding what got us to where we are today. Congressman Lewis, a tremendous story about why he feels the way he does in 2016, because what happened to him in the civil rights era. Very profound, very, very profound to me to see that, and it struck me very personally. We have got to continue this with a passion, with a vengeance, to continue to push the diversity training. Do I think training is everything? I think it's the lifeblood of change. I think that the lifeblood of change is continuing to do this over and over and over again until it becomes who we are. Not just something that we do. It's become something of who we are. In regards to your question about rural and versus urban policing, we have I have the responsibility for 3 forms of policing in Indiana. an urban or rural, and a combination of the two. They all require very different pieces and parts. The rural component is about 60 counties in Indiana. The urban is about 15, and a combination is the rest, up to a total of 92 counties around Indiana. We're very, very careful and very thoughtful about how we assign folks. If they grew up in an urban metropolitan area, we're probably not going to send them to a county of 6,000 or 7,000 people. So we try and match their backgrounds to their areas of assignment. Why? Cultural diversity, to understand the culture in which they're going to work. So it's very, very important, and we spend a tremendous amount of time doing that, even though we have a lot of work to do.
I want to commend you. I think that is a excellent piece of training that your agency does, and I'm sure others do it as well. I know Prosecutor Carey has a quick comment. We're going to get him right after Pastor Ellis.
I would say with respect to what this 10-point do, it's an interesting question because a lot of times people call the 10-point coalition about police conduct or police misconduct, and we're like, hey gang, it's not really what we do, you know. But our advice every time is make sure you run out and fill out that complaint. If it's that serious, go through that process. You need to touch, because whatever you do and whatever action you take, you're going to need to touch that base. So make sure that you go through all of the things that they have set up, that you go through. You touch all of those bases. You fill out the complaint and get a resolution, and then you might work from. If you don't get satisfaction, you don't work from there. But there's something else, because we also hear, well, there's no use of filling out a complaint. Nothing's going to happen.
Good.
And the reality is, maybe not then, but when you fill out a complaint, realize that you lay a marker down. And if a person is misbehaving and they continue to get complaint after complaint after complaint, then we as a community can come and talk to and say, this guy's got 13 complaints. What's the deal? Why is he still on the street? And then we can hold them better accountable. But if you just say, forget about it, and you don't fill out the complaint, then it goes as if, you know, there's nothing against them. And so sometimes when, you know, things happen, they say, well, we checked them and their record is clear. Well, maybe the record's not clear, but people didn't take the time or the energy to go and fill out the complaint. So we too push filling out those complaints, even though you may not see the fruit of it. The other thing I would say in a wider sense is we can't jail our way out of this problem. You just talked about overcrowding and just talked about all of the dynamics of that. We know we couldn't build enough jails to lock everybody up. So we have to figure out a way to lock up, and I appreciate the U.S. Attorney down there, the most violent. The people that are the most violent in our societies that are bringing, and then for those that are not as violent or, you know, or first-time offenders, to think of some kind of diversionary programs and ways to treat them. And then, you know, with the issue of drugs, sometimes they don't need to be locked up. Sometimes they need treatment. And so we need to look at in a serious sense, because we simply cannot jail our way out of the problem. And that's where the community has to come in and other agencies have to come in to do their part, to do some things, because we simply can't lock everybody up.
Thank you. Prosecutor Carey, briefly, please.
I can be very brief. In regard to the issue about profiling, we routinely do legal training for police agencies, not only IMPD, but other agencies as well. And in that regard, you know, profiling not only is wrong in and of itself, but a police officer needs probable cause to believe that you have committed a crime in order to pull you over, whether it's traffic offense or otherwise. And so if an officer pulls over someone without probable cause and there's a kilo of heroin in the trunk, then we have no ability to prosecute that case. So we routinely drive home the point in training to the officers that you must have probable cause before you pull over an individual.
Thank you. So here's a question that we have seen over 24 times that is burning in many individuals' minds. We're going to have Attorney Minkler take a stab at it first, followed by Prosecutor Carey. It seems or appears that there has been repeated instances nationally where video evidence or other compelling evidence shows that officers have committed what would seem to be murder or acts of violence against individuals, yet and still they are rarely prosecuted. And it appears that there is a code between the prosecutors and police officers. What, if anything, is being done to ensure if that happens in Indianapolis, officers will be prosecuted, and what is the process for your different agencies? That is a loaded question, but it is appearing multiple times. So, Attorney Minkler, because we see it at a federal level of what your office can get involved with when things are pursued from a civil rights perspective, and then Prosecutor Curry, obviously, because it would happen locally. So, Attorney Minkler?
Certainly, and I understand why that's a perspective, because a lot of people paid a lot of attention to it. When it happens, there's certainly a lot of coverage. And I'm sure Prosecutor Curry will address this as well. Our office has prosecuted police officers with IMPD. We prosecuted federal agents. We've prosecuted attorneys. If anything, from my perspective, they're held to a higher standard from law enforcement officers. But what I would ask people to take caution. Whenever a police officer commits a crime, it tends to be very, very high profile. And there are police officers that have committed crimes. There's no basis to deny that. Certainly you can't deny it when it's on videotape. But I think that's such a small percentage of overall police officers. And in my mind, there's a complete difference from a civil rights perspective and a civil rights perspective of prosecuting an individual for under the color of state law violating somebody's civil rights, which I've done and which I've seen done, which is a priority of the Department of Justice and a priority of the FBI, versus a pattern and practice investigation where we've seen in some other police departments where the entire police department is, through their policies, through their training, through the way those policies are carried out, is flawed and committing civil rights abuses. Like Chief Reeder said, there have been a lot of positive steps here and in this state where I don't see those sorts of threats. But if an individual police officer commits a crime, and I know I see Nigel next to me, he's kind of shaking his head. He's probably a little suspicious of that. They will be held accountable, and I think my record's shown that, and I think Prosecutor Curry's record has shown that.
To interject, I think one thing that we can do to answer that question, and I mean, this is just kind of throwing this out. I think one thing that we can do is the prosecutor's office partners with the police department on a regular basis. Am I correct? I mean, I think one thing that we can do, if there's anything that happens here in this city, I think a special prosecutor would be something that would be a good recommendation, just because you work hand in, and not to say anything's biased, but you have an invested interest because you work with them on a daily basis. And so I think that, one thing that would be a good recommendation to this conversation and to interject would be a special prosecutor in cases like this, as well as, calling in the Department of Justice anytime something like this happens. Not necessarily the Civil Rights Department, but the Department of Justice, and getting them involved just so we can cover everyone's, tail as the police and on the side of everyone.
Well, look at feedback. Prosecutor Curry he's ready. He has one, I know he's familiar with this question.
I am ready, and I'll not put Nigel on the spot because I was tempted to ask Nigel if he could tell me how many police officers we prosecuted in the last 5.5 years. And when I'm out in the community, I will typically ask that question if those are the sort of questions. And I'm not sure I've ever had anyone guess more than 10. In 5.5 years that we've been in office, we've prosecuted 58 police officers.
Wow.
For various crimes, from petty crimes all the way up to the most serious crimes. And it's sort of, one of them sort of ties in, and I'm going to kind of get into our local press here, because one of them I think is a perfect example of what occurs in terms of creating a situation where there's mistrust in the community. There was a fellow by the name of Harry Hooks, African-American man who was arrested on a minor offense, taken to the arrestee processing center, and he was assaulted there by a white deputy by the name of David Carrico. And there was a lot of publicity about it at the time, and a lot of outcry, and a lot of coverage in the local press. Well, then that deputy was, first of all, it actually came to light because Harry Hooks went to the police department and filed a complaint, a citizen's complaint, about what had occurred to him. When the sheriff followed up and looked into it, David Carrico was fired. The information came to us. we filed charges against Deputy Carrico. I personally tried that case to send the message that there's not a double standard. But by that time, the attention of the press had turned to other things, and there was no coverage of the fact that David Carrico had been fired, that David Carrico had been taken to trial, convicted of battery upon Harry Hooks. And interestingly, Harry Hooks said to me several times, I personally tried that case, said to me several times, he goes, I just thought this would be swept under the rug. But it wasn't. We have prosecuted 58 police officers in 5.5 years. Every single one of those cases was investigations done by the police department themselves. And so I'm very passionate about that. If police officers step over the line, they commit a crime. The police officers themselves, the 99% of the police officers are good, conscientious police officers, do not want those individuals on the police department, and we're certainly going to hold them accountable if they step over the line.
Thank you. I know Adrian has a quick response to that. Then we're going to go right back over to Max with the Stations of Radio 1 for another question, followed by Jill from CBS 4 and Fox 59.
I want to first say thank you for your responses and for being so thorough in what you've said, because I think as a concerned member of the community, I get a lot of calls on a very regular basis at the Urban League. I know that when people get concerned and people are emotional and people are angry, we get the calls on a very regular basis. That's not a story that people know the answer of. They don't know what you're doing at the prosecutor's office. And if we could ask for anything, we could ask the whole story is told, and not just when it goes left and it looks like it's something that's going for ratings, but when it goes right. Mm-hmm. Because if our community doesn't know, then it just fuels the fire.
True.
And there's stuff that's happening, and I said it before we even started today. Conversations between people that are sitting up here happen all the time. That's how we keep the peace in Indianapolis. But at the same time, the community doesn't know it. So all the media's in here. We need you to help us tell that story.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go over to Max Williams from...
Quick question. I think this is very important, and I know. But I think one thing that we really need to look at as well is I keep hearing the notion that, 99% of cops are good and 99 and there's just 1% and there's one part that's bad. But what happens when that one part does something wrong? And like you said, that the police officers, but I think something that we need to bring up in this conversation especially is the thin blue line and how that kind of works. Because I think that's something that's very real between officers and gathering behind an officer that didn't necessarily do something and not necessarily doing everything that they can to find out what was wrong or what happened. I think the thin blue line is something that we need to take a serious look at in Indianapolis and across the country.
Superintendent, Major?
Yes, the thin blue line is a reality. 46 years of being a police officer, that thin blue line has gotten so thin because we can't, not we, but as police officers who used to get away with a lot of things back in the old days. We had corrupt situations, we had corrupt cities, we had corrupt police departments. We are no longer that able to do that with the media and everything, with cell phones out here. We couldn't do that if we wanted to anymore. And I'm proud to say that we don't want that. Like I said, my unit prosecuted Carrico that we're talking about. We went out and we found him, and we investigated, and we turned it over to him, and they prosecuted him. We don't want those people in our situation anymore. So the thin blue line has gotten so thin you can hardly see it anymore.
Superintendent, feedback?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think I appreciate what Nigel's thinking. I don't necessarily agree with him, though. I think the secret's only good with two people if one of them's dead. And that's just the reality in today's world. I hear you loud and clear, Major, and I think you're exactly right. The possibility of that and the probability of that are very, very different. And I don't know the answer to this, but I will find out sometime here relatively soon. What number of complaints do we get today versus those that we got the generation before mine? I think that would be a very, very interesting dichotomy to see what's happening now, because I think history is a pretty predictor of our future. But none of us predicted this in regards to the media output. And the way in which we would one day be interviewed. Never in a million years did I think I'd be sitting like this with all of you that know way more about this than me and communicating with so many people instantly. So those days are long gone, and that you're right. That thin blue line is razor thin.
Thank you. I think one thing that's very interesting is that we talked about it earlier today while we were on AM 1310 The Light was Chief Reader, who ran the Citizens Police Complaint Board for 24 years, mentioned that last year there were 85 complaints that came into his office, if I'm not mistaken. And I appreciate his honesty and feedback. And he said, he knows personally that there were a higher number of individuals impacted by that. However, it goes back to the conversation that we've had today, which is folks feel like nothing is going to happen. Folks feel like it's going to get swept under the rugs. Folks feel like, they're going to come back and retaliate and, target me, so I don't want to make that complaint. But I think we have a very valid example in what Prosecutor Curry just gave us with that sheriff's deputy and Major Roney, who just really kind of, it's a one-off instance where he kind of just said, hey, that thin blue line, while we know that it exists, we will never say that it doesn't, but his actual bureau was the one who actually investigated and turned over their findings to the prosecutor's office. We want to kick it over to Max Williams with the Stations of Radio 1, who has a question.
Yes, this question comes from Talia on Hot 96.3's Facebook live feed. She would like to know what will be done in reference excuse me, to rehabilitated felons in regards to jobs. If they can't be employed, they run the risk of reoffending.
Attorney Minkler, I definitely want you to answer that, but I definitely want Pastor Jackson because he's intimately involved in that as well in his works. Attorney Minkler?
Sure, thank you. So reentry is what you're talking about. It's a big part of what the Department of Justice now does. It used to be just law enforcement. Now we clearly see reduction of violent crime also being keyed for reentry. And so when people come out of prison, they're going to come out of prison, they pay their debt to society. We want to make sure that the things that cause them to go to prison in the first place aren't there. The number one problem is a job. So in April, we, along with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office and the law school, hosted a job fair. It was very well attended. One of the big things we work on is getting people out of prison driver's licenses, identification cards. Those are things that they need to get jobs. So the other thing we do is and they do this in Marion County and they do this in federal court, is they have reentry courts where the most challenged people coming out of prison, the ones most likely to fail, meet with somebody from our office once a month and with a federal judge once a month, going over the issues that most impact somebody going back to prison. And those actually end up being issues like housing, jobs, family relationships, and not criminal behavior. Recidivism is a huge problem, and so for me, reentry is a public safety issue, because if you can get somebody a job and a place to live and a date on the weekend, they'll stay out of trouble.
Thank you, Attorney Minkler. Major Roney, I know your department is doing things before they reintegrate in their release,
right,
and then we'll kick it over to Pastor Jackson.
While they're in the jail, we have 82 programs within the jail itself to help with people before they get out of jail. While they're in the process of going to court, we're letting them take courses to get their GED, alcoholism programs, drug programs, any kind of program that we can do to help them, that we can perform in the jail. We're doing, like I said, we have 82 programs going on right now.
Thank you. Pastor Jackson?
One of the things I think you have to work on is expungement. A lot of companies will not hire you if you have a felony. The police department will hire you if you have a misdemeanor, but will not hire you if you have a felony. The work that sometimes we provide, we want to hire returning citizens, and when they have a felony, we can't hire them because of state regulations to drive our school buses for our Christian school and daycare. Just to get a job almost anywhere, once it is determined or discovered that that individual has a felony, then they lose the job or not hired at all. We had a call in at the church a few months ago, and out of all the men who were there, it's about 13 guys, only one had a job. So the probability of the other 12 or 11 guys returning or recidivating was very high. And a lot of the folks, whether male or female, need an enormous amount of wraparound services when they get out. And that has to begin immediately. The faith base can help, but a lot of times, a lot of our faith base are not sufficiently funded to be able to meet the needs of folks who are returning to our society. So I think if we had just sufficient amounts of wraparound services, where spiritual formation is concerned, a lot of times in these settings we don't talk about the biggest issue. And of course, to get my master's degree, I had to take a lot of spiritual formation classes, and that's something that's the big one. At the end of the day, people need spiritual formation or reformation, and that's not something that's easy to do, but it can be done.
Aaron, if I might jump in too to say, but this is the other part of the equation of community. We talk about community policing, and that's the business sector. Because the business sector that would step up and hire some returning citizens. We currently, as we, one of the areas we patrol, the Butler-Tarkington area, and we have gone with our partners 291 days without a homicide in the Butler-Tarkington area. And Reese Welding has hired 20 ex-offenders or returning citizens, and most of them are turning out well. They took a chance, and they said to us they're doing fine. They just needed a chance, and we need more companies. I think 5 more are working at Scotty's Brewhouse on Butler's campus, but that's the part that the business sector can play. And when we talk about our issues, it's everybody's issue, and everybody has to look at what role they play. And certainly there's a place and there's a role for business to play. Again, as we said, you can't lock everybody up. And these returning citizens, you have to give them a path, or they're going to go back to what they know. And especially if they don't have a faith center or a spiritual formation, they're not going to starve.
Right.
So we have to identify those areas and the roles that people can play.
Well, that's great to hear, especially, Scotty's Brewhouse and the Wooden Company. I know Scott Weiss personally has done a lot to help individuals in our community, so we commend him and the other companies. I want to kick it over to Jill Glavin from CBS 4 and Fox 59 News, who will present us with a question for the panelists.
I'm going to try to combine a few questions since we're getting towards the end. So we've had quite a few people reach out to us with questions about youth in particular. I've had a couple of people mention their thoughts on the need for youth centers, for community centers, for investment. We had both DeWitt and Reggie write in about that. DeWitt saying, I think community centers that offer children and teens an alternative, like the Parks Department programs I grew up on, would be helpful in helping the youth. And then we also had a question from Anjanita who said, what is being done to educate children to not turn to violence? Hopefully that's not too much at one time. But
I mean, so many, give me 1 second, so many are ready to chomp at the bit at that. Everybody's like, oh, it's hard. Chief Reader?
Obviously, the thing that IMPD is doing is we have, obviously, PAL Club. Along with PAL Club, we have tried to galvanize all of the youth-sponsored programs that IMPD was a part of. And we've started to reach out. We haven't done as much as we would have liked to have done this summer to make sure that we grab hold of individuals and giving them opportunity to have some kind of formative experiences with the police during the summer weeks that they're out of school. One of the things I think that we're dealing with, obviously, is a shortened length of time now when kids are out of school. So now they're going to a more year-round school model. So they're not out quite as long. So we really have to be up and geared and ready to engage them as soon as they get out, if we're going to make some meaningful relationships and form meaningful relationships with them before they go back. So that's one of the things. I know Pastor Jackson does a work program for youth, and I'll let him speak to that. We understand that problem, but I think the thing that we really need to do is to start to look at how do we engage those students prior to them getting out of school, getting them ready, and having them being able to be engaged quicker once they get out, as opposed to waiting until they get out and then trying to do something after they're out, because they really don't have a whole lot of time.
We're at the about 15 or 20 minute mark before we end, so we are approaching what we would call our rapid fire round. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then we're going to just move on to the next. So we're going to go with Pastor Jackson, then Adrian, and then we're going to go to Liz with WRTV 6 for the next question. Pastor Jackson?
Yeah, we surveyed 500 young people in 2014. We asked them what they want most, and the young people overwhelmingly, number one, said we want money. Number two, jobs. Three, education. Church was way down the bottom of the list. But I wasn't offended by that, but look at the psychology of that. Money, jobs, education. And so youth don't just need jobs in the summer, they need jobs year-round. Youth are competing with adults for jobs we used to get. Where state legislation is concerned with summer youth employment, you can't hire a lot of youth that need it. They say, well, you can only work on your parents' farm. Well, who in the hood has a farm? They say you can get a paper route. I had a paper route, but those are motorized now. So we have to look at state legislation where child labor laws are concerned, all of that, and make sure these young people have jobs year-round. We have to create those jobs.
Adrian, 30 seconds.
They need something to do. The only way that we ever interact with young people is in a negative way. They go downtown because they want to socialize with each other. They want to see people that they don't normally see. And how do we treat them when they get downtown? We don't want you here. Leave. Don't talk to each other. Don't congregate. Don't be together. It's about time we create a place where kids can learn how to socialize in this city, a place where they can learn how to interact with adults, a place where they can learn how to be contributing members of society and not pushed around, shoved around, put in these little corners and told not to go somewhere. Indianapolis severely needs something where kids can actually do to socialize. Boys and girls clubs are great, YMCAs are great, but that's not nightlife. That's not a place where you can socialize freely and not a place where you can learn how to be a part of society. That's what our youth need.
Thank you. Liz, WRTV Channel 6. We're going to go to you for our next question.
Right. This question is coming from Twitter. It was sent by Useful Notes. He or she is asking what progress, if any, is being made to get violent offenders and guns off the streets.
Prosecutor Curry, I know that's a tough one for 30 seconds, but I'm confident you can do it, followed by Attorney Minkler.
We prosecute approaching 2,000 gun cases every single year, and those individuals are, some are offenses where the defendant's subject to suspended sentence, gets suspended sentence, all the way up to serious violent felons who are subject to getting a prison sentence up to 10 to 12 years. But our focus is upon individuals who are perpetrating violent crime, and those individuals who come out of the DOC and don't take advantage of reentry, but instead are carrying weapons again. Those are our priority. Those individuals should not be carrying weapons, and that is an area that we concentrate on.
Attorney Minkler?
Yeah, the federal laws for illegal gun possession are very harsh but fair. And if you're a convicted felon and you possess a gun, it's a violation of federal law. If you commit about any crime of violence or any drug trafficking crime with a firearm, it's a violation of federal law. And all those are exposed to mandatory minimum sentencing. The felon in possession statute in particular carries from 15 years to life if you have enough offenses, and 10 years if you just are a felon in possession of a firearm. Anytime you possess a firearm in commission of a crime of violence, be it a robbery or a drug trafficking crime, it's a consecutive 5 years. So the sentences are very harsh. They're fair, and progress is being made. But I do want to go full circle and agree that we can't just incarcerate our way out of this problem. It has to be built on community trust. We don't live in a police state. We can't go house to house and see who illegally has a gun. We need the community's help. We need the community to tell us who's breaking the law. We need people like Nigel to interact with us and point out where there are flaws in the system and where we should look and not ignore that. So
we're going to go to B. Swift, who has a question.
All right, and maybe you guys are doing this, but I just wanted to know, because this is about community policing and building relationships, but IMPD does some dope events like the IMPD Day Downtown. Now, are there any other plans to do these events in local neighborhoods? Like, it's cool to do it downtown, but why not do it on the Post Road or in Hallville? Why not team up with the guys that's doing the ceasefire movement where they're on the corner every weekend holding signs? Do we see police officers out there? Are you guys willing to do these kind of events where the prosecutor's office will come out, or, you know what I mean, and you're actually in the neighborhood before you start? I know it was talked about this year, more beat walking to the beat, but you just can't walk in my neighborhood and expect me to instantly trust you. Are you guys willing to come into these neighborhoods and do events and get the kids to trust you by playing basketball with them and, you know, feeding them with free hot dogs or whatever? Like, is this things you guys are working on and like, yo, we need to do this, or, you know, is this an idea that could be done?
So I know we'll have multiple people that want to answer this. We're going to go with Chief Reader. Would love to hear from Superintendent Carter on what they're doing. Also, the Sheriff's Department and the Prosecutor's Office as well. 30 seconds. Let's go, Chief.
Yes.
I love it.
And we have, as a matter of fact, tomorrow.
Yes.
We have a night out all over town. Saturday, there'll be a basketball game at Washington Park, police against kids. Community days, every district has one. Maybe we need to be better in terms of getting that information out so people know. But yes, they're very engaged in community. That's one of the things that we're really trying to do. I'm going to shut up now so you'll have time.
And I would add, I would highly encourage you to use individuals like B Swift and Nigel who have a plethora of social media followers to help get the word out. But not only to help to get the word out, but to engage them in the planning process and have them there with you, because we know B Swift, being a new father, he's not getting much sleep. So we're going to add on.
I've done my fair share of donut eating contests with the police.
Fair enough. Superintendent Carter and then Major Roney.
No donuts with me, not publicly.
As long as they're Long's Bakery, but that's another
Only
discussion.
at home. The answer is yes. We had a situation up in Lafayette here a couple weeks ago. There was a trooper investigating a situation in downtown Lafayette. 3 other young guys came up to him. There's a basketball court next door, and the one of the young guys said, "What do you got?" to the trooper. And the next thing you know, all four of them get out of their cars and they're engaged with these kids in a small community setting. It went viral. We got tremendous coverage from that. It's not just the ISP,
right,
but it's policing in general. The answer is yes. Can we do it all the time, everywhere? No. But by golly, we ought to certainly give it a concerted effort.
Major?
Yes, and my answer is yes also. And I used to do that, but we had more people back in the days. We have less people on the streets, IMPD, Sheriff's Department, State. We don't have enough people to be out like we want to be. We have, the sheriff is opening up a sheriff's ranch. It's going to be one of the projects to take kids from different churches and different communities, to take them from the urban community, take them out, let them ride horses, let them have fellowship with the officers and stuff from all around the state. We need to do more of that. We need to have more police officers around so we can take the time out to do what we're supposed to be doing, be part of the community, stop. If nothing else, some of us are too old to play ball, but we can sit there and watch and give some encouragement or tell them what they're doing wrong, because we know.
Prosecutor Curry?
Yeah, I could still kill you at a game of horse. I couldn't run up and down the floor. But our community prosecutors are out every single week. In fact, when we're done here, I'll hook you up with Peg McLeish, our communications director, and get you hooked into the things that we're doing every single day out in the community, primarily through our community prosecutors.
I think one thing that we can focus on with community engagement, especially, is instead of just going out and engaging with kids, I think one thing that you have to do, especially with youth in general, is to offer a seat at that, like you said, offer a seat at that table so that we can come up with some of the solutions. I mean, I think tonight's a really good example of, I'm just here. I haven't got to say much, and I'm not to offend anybody, but I think that our youth is not being heard. We're constantly being looked at as people that, they're doing this, they're doing that, but instead of actually sitting down and talking to us and taking it there to see what's going on, like, for instance, like going to the park and stuff, that stuff's not stuff we're interested in anymore. We're on Twitter all day. There's little kids that have Twitter and they don't have phones, and so the urge to go outside is not something that all of us want to do. And so I think that's something that we have to do, is take a real serious look at how we can engage youth and get them involved, and not just have them as a silent partner, or have them as a participant. We need to go in detail and plan with them. So.
And that's why we love Nigel and his youthfulness, because I think what he said is very, very valid. Very, very valid. Look at what we initially had planned for today was going to be a live setting, and it's quickly transformed into a virtual setting because that's how most people connect now. I didn't want to leave out special Agent Abbott. I recently looked at a comment that says there was a raid in which the FBI was involved in. So your officers and agents really from the FBI are working hand in hand in different task forces. What, if anything, is the Bureau doing to increase their community policing relations?
Well, working in partnership with local authorities, with Mr. Curry's office, with Troy Riggs, with Superintendent Carter. And in fact, our relationships are extremely cordial. I have coffee with Superintendent Carter and Chief Riggs all the time, discussing exactly these type of issues in community policing. And wherever we have opportunities with the FBI to partner with them, we do that. I would say 50% of my job is outreach, as it is for the superintendent and for the chief and for the sheriff. That's a big, big part of it. When I'm invited by Chief Riggs to go for Ride for Peace in one of the neighborhoods, which I understand there's going to be several more of those coming up, I'm always one of the first people to be there. And then we also have agents who do outreach as well and mentoring, and those are programs that are very important to us and beneficial certainly to the communities that we reside in across the country.
Pastor Jackson, 30 seconds, and then we have one final question for every member of the panel.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful to expect the police officers to do all these programs and not police the city. Since the late 1800s, when the police department started here, we have never had the right proportion of police officers in proportion to the growth of the city. We were at two police officers per 1,000 residents in late 1890s, and we are still at 2 police officers per 1,000 residents in the 21st century. We need to take care of that. We need to fund the right number of police officers. You have a business, and your business grows, you hire people. With regard to community policing, our city is growing. We're over 1 million people in the Metroplex area, and we still have the same number of police officers in proportion to the people who live here as we did in the late 1890s. That's unacceptable.
Thank you. So we are at our final questions, and we are going to go panel member by member on the panel and let you answer this. Once again, this is our rapid fire. This is the final question, starting with Reverend Ellis from the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. Reverend Ellis, can you let us know what initiatives Can you let us know what initiatives the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition is currently undertaking to improve community policing relations?
Well, I don't know. I would say community policing is kind of what we do. And when we are out in the communities, it's our job to do a couple of things. We engage people and we talk to them. And for those that don't know what we do, it is by direct engagement of those in quote unquote high risk areas. And we talk to those that are likely to be involved in violence and crime, or victims of crime, or drug dealers or gangbangers. I'm hurrying, but that's what we do. That is the mark of what we do. But we also raise the community consciousness that needs to be raised to say we don't have to accept the homicides. We don't have to accept to say that's another one. We raise that consciousness and the level to say we can take back our community, we can take back our streets, but we must do it together. We must do it as a community. And this is my last, I'll just say, what Nigel said, mind you said a mouthful, since you may not realize it, but you said a mouthful. And I think with the law enforcement that's here, please understand that when you are talking about solutions, please include the community needs to be at the table. Everybody needs to be at the table so that it's not your solution, but it's our solution. And we fathom those out together. So.
That is perfect, because question that we have for Prosecutor Curry. Prosecutor Curry, will your office consider, if it does not already have this in place, incorporating citizens into different review processes as it relates to discipline when it comes to police officers and or criminals who continue to recommit the crimes in our neighborhoods?
Well, first of all, we would have no authority whatsoever over police discipline. If a police officer commits a crime, then we'll prosecute him. But in terms of discipline, something short of a crime, we have no role whatsoever to play.
Let me clarify. My apologies.
Yeah.
Meaning that I think they meant if a officer was actually a case was presented to your office for prosecution, would you take into consideration feedback from the community on what role I guess they're asking you could prosecute them at it. I know there are statutes that already tell you what you can prosecute at. So I think what they're getting at, it seems like is similar to the citizens police complaint. Would your office have that same kind of board in place, or are you even able to do that?
No, we would not be able to do that. I mean, the ability and the responsibility of prosecuting a crime falls to our office, and we have to make that judgment call, and obviously we do. And I would mention one last thing about that in terms of going back to the number of police officers prosecuted. At some point, Chief Rick Height, asked me to go speak to the new recruit class to send exactly that message. I posed the question to the 40-some new recruits, how many police officers think we prosecuted? And they couldn't even come close either. But I was asked to go speak to them to tell them the days, and Major Roney said, the days when you sweep those sort of things under the rug are over. So I was asked to present that message to the recruit class. I did. They videotaped it and showed it to every single roll call of IMPD across the city.
Thank you. Adrian Slash, there are many organizations that are doing great work within the city of Indianapolis. Outside of the organizations that you represent, how can young people become engaged and involved in the process to improve their communities?
Raise your hand and show up when you've received the invitation. I mean, the best thing that any of us can do, social media flyers spread like hot fire. So when someone posts a flyer and it piques your interest, don't turn your mind off and say, oh, they're not inviting me, they're talking to older people, or they're talking to business people. You need to read every flyer as though it was speaking directly to you, and you need to show up, ask questions, and respond. So we've heard a lot about the Citizens Complaint Review Board. File a complaint. Part of being the change is actually igniting the change and actually doing something and speaking up. And as I reminded a lot of people last week, you're woke now. You've heard all the things that these people have told you today. You know. Now that you're awake, you can't allow people sitting next to you to sleep. You must share information, and you must make sure that they understand that what they think, what their misconceptions or what their perceptions might be, might not also be true, and that they need to continue to look into things, ask questions, and show up. Or when you see a town hall flyer, it's one for this one, or if there's any follow-up, log on, pay attention, or show up and actually ask your questions.
Thank you. Chief Reader, it's been talked about a lot around the Citizens Police Complaint process, and knowing that you were the former head of that department, can you briefly articulate the process of which one can file a complaint and how they should follow up if they've already filed one?
Filing a complaint, the incident for most people has to occur within 60 days. It's filed, it's taken in at the office, which is at 1921 City County, been on the 19th floor. At that point, it's investigated. It will be then sent back to the Citizens Complaint Board. They will review it. They have a public meeting that reviews those particular actions, and then their finding is then sent to the chief. Once that happens, it's logged in. Everything is encapsulated in terms of documentation. The data is stored, and it follows that officer from that point forward. If, in fact, you need to file a complaint after 60 days, you can still do that. It will still be investigated. It just will not be reviewed by the Citizens Police Complaint Board itself. So the complaint, any complaint is taken seriously and vetted thoroughly, and then reported to the department.
Thank you. Pastor Jackson, in your involvement with youth on a day-to-day basis in our community, what advice would you give to parents on educating their children in the way they interact and deal with law enforcement?
I would say that follow instructions. Do what the police officer tells you to do. Respect the police officer. That's in a nutshell, the simplest thing. If you're given an instruction, follow it. If you're told to do something, follow those instructions. That doesn't guarantee that there won't be an incident, but it does, I think, decrease the possibility that there will be.
Thank you. Attorney Minkler, it appears once again that the Department of Justice is involved in many recently police incidents where police officers are accused of wrongdoing, and the Department of Justice invokes a civil rights investigation. I think this question came up earlier, which is why we're seeing it again. How can one file a complaint if they feel that their civil rights have been violated, and what is the process for that?
Well, there are three ways you can file this complaint. You can file it directly with our office on our office's website, or by calling us. We actually have a civil rights complaint form. You can make a complaint to the FBI, who's our investigative agency, whose priority is enforcing the civil rights laws. Or you can call your local police department, somebody like Chief Reeder, who would make sure it would get into the right hands. A minority of our civil rights prosecutions are against law enforcement officers. But as I stated earlier, and I know Nigel is somewhat dubious about this, but we've prosecuted many police officers. We had a very successful excessive force prosecution of a sheriff's deputy in Putnam County. That is a priority of ours. It will continue. And if a police officer, under the color of state law, violates somebody's constitutional rights, and there's any harm that is caused, they can be prosecuted. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel Long, you have been extremely successful to others in our community on how to organize and mobilize protests in a civil manner and actually get results and engage in conversation with stakeholders, including law enforcement and community members. What advice would you give to other young people who want to follow in your footsteps and also take a proactive approach in getting involved and engaged in their community?
I think
someone complimented you very well. I think that's what they're saying, so I love it.
Well, shout out to whoever that was. No, but I think it starts with raising your consciousness, and so learning about especially in the black community, learning about blackness, learning about civil disobedience, how it was done in the civil rights, realizing that fight or that struggle is not the same now, and we've moved into a whole different kind of battlefield, in fighting for our rights as a people. And I think that one of the things that we can do, especially moving forward, is one, you have to show up to events. So when you see anything, you see, like she said, just to echo what she said, you have to show up. And that's the most important thing. You have to be ready to learn, and you have to come with the right attitude. As well as, we have to support our own black businesses as well. That's one thing. Sorry, I just have to put a shameless plug. We want to support our black businesses, especially because this coming up Saturday. I know I'm not going to get another chance to talk, so I want to say this. Coming up on Sunday, the 7th, at Flanner House, there will be a black-owned business. We have over 90 vendors. A black-owned business block party. We have over 90 vendors. For kids that are looking to get started, in social justice and civil rights, that can be that'll be your first start. There'll be plenty of people that have experience and that have the know-how to do those type of things. And so I urge anyone to come out to that, and we'll get started with it, whatever it is that we want to do, and finding our next steps as to what we want to do.
I love it. I love Nigel's boldness. It reminds me of a young me. So I appreciate that. And just, in what Nigel's saying, and for those who are watching, this is not a black issue. This is not a police issue. This is a community issue. So just as we encourage and promote the supporting black-owned businesses, we support it for all businesses and minority businesses. But I love the bonus that Nigel has, and definitely we want to support that event. Superintendent Carter, the question to you is, I lost it. The question to you is, with the Indiana State Police and the work they do around the state, what, if anything, can residents in urban areas do to work with you and your department on cultural sensitivity training if you feel that is needed?
It's absolutely needed, and I'm about to immerse myself in a guy named Nigel's life. I've known him for about an hour and a half, and I'm going to be spending some time with him.
Love it.
Cultural diversity is so very important. I got to get on a philosophical soapbox for just a moment. My generation has got to take responsibility for the way in which the world is. And I'm 54 years old. Now's the time. We have got to acknowledge that. We're having an extraordinary opportunity before us. And either we address this opportunity with open eyes, recognizing mistakes, and move forward, or we kick this can down the road, and my daughter's got to apologize to the generation after hers. Unacceptable. Now is our time. I love the word imagine. I love the word imagine. We all must have these hard conversations. I hear it all over the country. We saw it on the national stage, both the RNC and the DNC, having those difficult conversations. That's great. Let's do it. Let's stop talking about it, and let's actually do it. What action steps are there? I don't think we can probably articulate those right now. But what we can do is all of us believe that one day we can all live in peace together on this planet. I saw it in Cleveland. I took 140 troopers to Cleveland a week and a half ago. And we stood in with hundreds and hundreds of people that hated who I was. But they were so darn respectful, it changed my life. It's real. It can absolutely happen. But we've got to be able to step out into a very uncomfortable place and recognize that we own some of this. And then move forward. I'd die for someone that hates me. I really would. I would. What else can I do? What else can my profession do other than engage in this open dialogue? I'll go anywhere if this guy's sitting to my right and the change agent is sitting to my right. It's not some old guy like me.
Very well said. I commend you for that. Special Agent Abbott for the FBI. Your agency has a Citizens Academy. It appears that elite members of the community, I'm assuming, I don't know what that means, probably executive. It seems that elite members of the community are always invited to participate in the FBI Citizens Academy. How can a everyday Joe be a part of that process, and how can we be engaged with your agency after this? How can we be engaged with your agency after this dialogue is over?
Sure, it's a great question. And by the way, Doug, that's a pretty hard act to follow. But yeah, we do have a Citizens Academy, and I would take I disagree with the opinion that was forwarded, and that is that every member everybody that has gone through the Citizens Academy and agents have the ability to nominate other people. And we get we only do this once a year because we put so much of an investment and time into it because it is so important. And we have over 150, sometimes a couple hundred applicants just for 25 slots. Wow. And then when we choose those individuals, we try to choose it across the spectrum of our society here in Indianapolis. And so some are what you might consider more the elite business areas, our political figures, things like that. But then we also have others that are from the communities that are doing important things within their community. And we try to pick people who will have a huge sphere of influence so that after they learn what's behind the curtain with the FBI, we can get more transparency and they can share that with the community that they affect and that they exist in.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Be swift. I think you have the most questions, so we'll pick one, which is a good thing. That means young people are engaged and involved. You commented earlier in today's discussion and also on the radio station that you have had several incidents, not all bad and not all good, with law enforcement. What advice in the role that you play with engaging young people would you give how they should conduct themselves when interacting with police based off of your own experience?
You still have to treat them like they're your parent. You know, I don't disrespect them. I don't care how they talk to me. I've heard certain things from police officers and I still hit them with yes sir, no sir. Mm-hmm. Yes ma'am, no ma'am. You know what I mean? Like, that gets you so far in life, period, point blank. That person might be trying to engage you into something and trying to pull you into something, and just being able to say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, it can deflate that. And I've learned that from getting ready to go to a hothead and realizing that this person has a badge and he's going to win the battle. So, you know, just treat them with respect. no matter what the situation is. You know, do the right thing. Don't be a real dude. Don't want to be on the news for being a real dude. It's better to do the right thing. You know,
Right.
that's what I do.
I commend that answer. I think sometimes that's hard to do. You feel like you're being challenged or you're not being treated fairly, and you feel like, hey, I have something to say. But one thing that I've learned from both of my parents is that's the authority right then and there. They're going to win right then and there. Then all the instances that we've heard today of filing complaints and following up with the district commanders will help you win the battle if you feel that you were mistreated. Last but certainly not least, we have Major Roney from the Marion County Sheriff's Department. Although the Sheriff's Department does not have a set jurisdiction in patrolling as they used to, we still see your officers out and about on the streets pulling individuals over and writing traffic tickets. Writing traffic tickets. What, if anything, can the Marion County Sheriff's Department do to work with citizens, even though some may feel that they don't have the right to write tickets or arrest them?
We do have the right. We are full-fledged, full law-abiding police officers in the state of Indiana. Our officers can do anything that any other police officer in the state can do. Pull over, but most of our part is we're out there serving warrants, felony warrants. We're checking on sex offenders 24/7 every day, 365 to keep the community safe. Also, we have the city-county building safety, and we have the Marion County Jail. But a lot of times when you see us out on the street, we're looking for people with major felony warrants. We have license plate readers that are going to alert us to sex offenders in and around the schools and stuff. And so we're out doing all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you see us pulling somebody over. There may be an ulterior motive because a license plate reader has said this man has a felony, or this man is a sex offender and he's in the school jurisdiction. So we're out there doing our job as mandated by the law. And I hope that answers the question. Yeah. I have another something I want to say.
Go for it.
I'd like to challenge people around Nigel's age to let us know what it is we can do, because we don't always know, because I'm one of the older folks. I don't know about Twitter and all that. So, the best I can do is stop out and reach out, but sometimes it's not going to hurt, and I never will turn anybody down that wants to stop and reach out to me. And it happens all the time, but if it needs to be done more, like I said, I'm available 24/7. Been that way all my life. Another thing, I always feel that sometimes it's good to fight from within. You can change things from within. So I'd like to challenge anybody who's got an aptitude or wants to make a change within police departments. Challenge yourself to go out for the police departments, or the sheriff's department, state police, and go through that recruit class and be a policeman and change things to the way you want them to be, because you're making them happen, not just talk. I want to see it happen. Go do it. Be that guy who steps up, goes out there, and becomes a police officer and learns how it is. And believe me, it's an admirable profession. For 46 years, I'm thankful to have been a police officer, and I don't miss my roots. I know where I come from. My whole family still lives here in Indianapolis, so anything that affects Indianapolis affects me.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the time that we spent this evening. I would highly encourage all of our viewers and also all of our panelists to engage in meaningful dialogue. So the challenge that I put out to our viewers, especially those who are young, follow the different Twitter and Facebook and social media accounts of every single police agency that is up here and law enforcement agency. And in like manner, those agencies should take the feedback and the dialogue that you're engaging with them online in a serious manner and reach out and have that communication with you. Once again, my name is Aaron Williams. I've had the distinct honor and privilege of hosting and moderating this event. Want to give a special thanks to ADW Productions for all of our audio and sound. Also to Tom from the Indiana State Police. He is the one to blame in a very good way for the heat that you're feeling with these great lamps that's providing our panelists with the best look. Also the stations of Radio 1 and Liz Dixon and Deion Levinstein and all the work that they've done. The Indiana State Police, they've been an integral part, and special thank you to Captain Burston and all that he's done. The 10-Point Coalition, the Department of Justice. We would be remiss if we didn't think about the FBI as well and their work. The Marion County County Sheriff's Department, we have the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and we also have the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, along with Adrian Slash, Nigel Long, and B. Swift. And last but certainly not least, our gracious host, the Center for Leadership Development and Dennis Bland. All the great work that they're doing here in Indianapolis, it's been phenomenal. It's been impacting the young people's lives over the last 15 or 20 years, and we thank them for that work. Once again, thank you all so much, and a special thanks to one of our longtime veteran news anchors who's moved behind the scenes, Ruth Ann Gordon. She's been great in helping lead and guide this conversation, so we thank you all. Thank you so much. We hope to have a follow-up to this in the coming months, and we thank you for being engaged in your community to make it a better place. Thank you all so much.